Ukraine got the aid that Zelensky and, of course, much of the neocon foreign policy establishment had been begging for from Congress, from the US Congress, for many months. Of course, this comes in a big package, over $90 billion, divided between Ukraine, $61 billion, Israel, some odd amount, I believe it was 14 or so billion, and then another 8 billion for Taiwan. Those numbers are rough, but around there it adds up to about 90 billion. But the Ukraine aid package was the story because it's supposed to be a game changer. Okay, this is supposed to be the aid that not only keeps Ukraine from losing, but gives Ukraine a chance to win against Russia. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. So let's break down, okay, where this aid is going. What does it all mean? And we're going to have friend of the show, Scott Ritter. He gave this analysis on Sputnik, which I think breaks down well what's in the aid package and how is it actually going to affect things on the battlefield. So let's take a listen.
$61 billion. A lot of money. Let's break it down. 13.8 billion of this will be used to provide weaponry to Ukraine. Now, this is not anything to, belittle. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of weaponry, but it's not 61 billion. There's another 9 billion that'll come to Ukraine in the form of just direct cash assistance. This enables the Ukrainian government to pay pensions, pay salaries, basically do things for the Ukrainian people that the United States Congress is apparently unwilling to do for the American people. That's a different issue altogether. But will this be enough to turn the tide? The answer is no. The $13.8 billion in military assistance that will be provided to Ukraine will be insufficient to basically halt the Russian advance that's currently ongoing and turn the tide to send the Russians back to, according to the Zelensky formula, the 1991 borders. This isn't just me making this assessment. This is the assessment of Ukraine's foreign minister, Kuleba, who has said that at this late stage in the game, there's no amount of military assistance that can stop the Russian advance. And he's correct. There's talk about magic weapons, the ATACMS, F-16s, more artillery ammunition.
And those ATACMS, sorry, apologies for the volume being low. It's actually on the side of the recording itself, Sputnik, so I'm unable to dial it up much. But in any event, these ATACMS have actually been already secretly given to Ukraine in order to mount an attack on Crimea. That has been the latest scandal with this aid. Even before the aid package was passed, the United States was trying to funnel weapons. But as Scott says, much of the Ukrainian side is already saying, and I'm going to show you that the United States side is saying this too, that this aid isn't going to really make a difference on the battlefield. So let's continue.
And all these, of course, if they make it to the front line, will complicate the military situation and cause Russia to suffer more casualties and cause the Ukrainians to suffer even greater casualties. But it won't stop the Russian advance. Right now, Russia enjoys military superiority, if not outright supremacy, along the entire line of contact, not just on the front lines, but extending well into the rear areas of the Ukrainian defense areas. As weapons are brought into Ukraine and brought up to the front line, they will be subjected to increasing levels of interdiction. Very little of this military assistance will actually make it to the Ukrainian soldier at the front line. And when it does, the Ukrainian soldier and this equipment will be dispatched relatively quickly by the Russians, who will be tracking this equipment throughout its entire journey from the west to the front lines. No, $13.1 billion, it'll be destroyed relatively quickly. It won't last long, and it certainly isn't going to change the outcome on the battlefield. Russia has the strategic advantage, and regardless of the amount of money that the United States, Europe, or anybody else pours into Ukraine, Russia will retain the strategic advantage until victory.
So that is, I think, a good summary of what is going to happen. It already is happening. Russia is parading M1 Abrams tanks. They're bringing it to their kind of NATO weapons Hall of Fame that they have been collecting since the beginning of this conflict, especially over the last year plus, when Russia just made absolute mincemeat out of Ukraine's so-called summer counteroffensive of 2023. So this aid, really what it does is it not only just prolongs the conflict, but it is going to enhance and increase the amount of death that Ukrainians, especially Ukrainians, and this is almost primarily the case, Ukrainians who are going to be sent out on the front lines, those Ukrainians who are now being chased down by the Ukrainian government to serve in this essentially lost conflict, a conflict that is being propelled and promoted by NATO. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of more Ukrainians will die. Russia will eliminate them because this, of course, is an existential conflict for Russia. They're not going to back down. And Russia has said this from the very beginning. The more aid that you send, the more weapons that you send, it may prolong the conflict, but it is not going to help the situation. So this aid was passed the week of April 24th. Biden passed it, signed it after the Senate basically rubber stamped it. There was no opposition. There's not an anti-war soul in Washington at this moment. So it is going through. And as Scott said, it's going to take a while for these weapons to get there. Once they do, they're all going to be shot down. But this isn't just Scott's analysis. This isn't even just the Ukrainian side, how they feel about this. It is also the Biden administration itself. Okay, so here's Politico. This was reported directly after Congress, the House of Representatives, ratified this aid package. It says the Biden administration isn't fully convinced Ukraine can win even with its new aid. Biden administration officials and lawmakers say the $60 billion package means Ukraine walks away from the battlefield with its country fully restored, or few Biden administration officials and lawmakers believe this. So, despite the time and political capital spent on $60 billion in aid for Ukraine, some Biden administration officials are skeptical it is enough for Ukraine to win its 2-year war with Russia. Battlefield dynamics have not shifted a lot in the last few months, and I'm going to show you that they're actually shifting in Russia's favor quite significantly, and that the mainstream media is now admitting this, but we'll get to that in a second. Battlefield dynamics haven't shifted a lot, they say, because Ukraine is low on weaponry and ammunition, while Congress was debating authorizing more aid, according to 3 U.S. officials, which all granted unanimity to detail sensitive internal thinking. This is a funny language, sensitive internal thinking. During that period, Ukraine struggled to maintain eastern territory, though Russia didn't make significant gains either. Although you could say that taking Avdiivka was a pretty significant gain, given what we're going to find out in a bit, what the media is sounding the alarm about in a second. Russia maintains a manpower and weapons advantage, and it would take a lot to reverse months and years of territorial losses. U.S. officials also asked questions about Ukraine's own tactics and priorities, especially after Kiev's counteroffensive failed, sapping forces of material and morale. The immediate goal is to stop Ukrainian losses and help Ukraine regain momentum and turn the tide on the battlefield. After that, the goal is to help Ukraine begin to regain its territories, said one of the officials. Will they have what they need to win? Ultimately, yes, but it's not a guarantee that they will. Military operations are far more complicated than that. Capitol Hill lawmakers are expressing concerns as well about whether the U.S. provided weapons can lead to a Ukraine defeat of Russia, or if it's just enough to temporarily fend off the invasion. That's the question, said a Democratic Senate aide. This answer matters greatly. Winning against Russia means Ukraine will get most or all of its territory back. Not losing. So this is what I love. By contrast, signals Ukraine can hold its lines and advance some, but fail to claw back what Russia seized. So they're going to use this term a lot, not losing, okay? Not losing. That's kind of where the U.S. foreign policy establishment, the neocons, are at with this conflict. They are no longer talking about the possibility of winning in a unanimous sense, in a sense that it is guaranteed. They can't even fake the hubris anymore. They are essentially admitting that not losing is probably the best that they can get. Biden, upon signaling the aid package for Ukraine on Wednesday, stressed that Russia uses its military to target civilian infrastructure, although this is, of course, not proven, highlighting the need to boost Kiev's firepower. They've killed tens of thousands of Ukrainians, bombed hospitals, kindergartens. So this is, of course, not proven, especially given what is proven with U.S. support for Israel's onslaught on Gaza. There is no proof. There's a lot of proof that Ukraine has actually shelled and bombed civilian infrastructure for 8, 9, 10 years. There's not a lot of proof that Russia is doing the same. And I think the casualty counts of civilians comparatively to, let's say, what Israel has wrought on Gaza say a lot about how Russia has fought this war. So we can just move on from that. John Kirby hinted Tuesday that Ukraine still doesn't have a fully formed plan to defeat Russia, though the U.S. would be in talks to crystallize one. We'll be able to continue to have these conversations with the Ukrainians about what their long-term strategy is for pushing back Russian aggression and then tailoring future packages to those needs. Okay? So there's a lot of debate about what a winning endgame for Ukraine looks like at this point. The Biden administration laments that months of congressional deliberation deprived Ukraine of weaponry that it needed to push back Russia. It's certainly possible that Russia could make tactical gains in the coming weeks. It's going to take some time for us to dig out of a hole that was created by 6 months of delays. So not even the Biden administration believes that it can really turn the tide in this conflict. And this aid isn't really going to do that. And so that's just one report. And then NBC News, okay, the same day that this was passed in the House, reported this. They said, the race is on. Will the U.S. aid arrive in time for Ukraine's fight to hold off Russia's army? And we have an answer to that right after we go over this a bit. For many in Kiev, the news that the aid package had finally passed Congress offered relief and renewed hope for victory. But a long and difficult fight is still ahead. After months of political wrangling and battlefield reversals, Kiev has reason to cheer. Now the race is on to ensure that military aid by the United States gets to the front lines in time to make a difference to troops trying to ward off Russia's advancing army. For many in Ukraine, the news of the aid package offered relief and renewed hope of victory, with the war now being in its third year. But in the streets and trenches of Ukraine, those who spoke to NBC News espoused a view shared by many Western military analysts that much of the damage had already been done, and while important and welcome, $60 billion worth of supplies would only go so far. The aid is coming at a vital moment for the U.S. ally, which faces severe ammunition and personnel shortages that have left it in a desperate situation on the front lines for the last few months, said London-based think tanker Neil Melvin. Russia is gradually grinding down Ukrainian men and weapons. The U.S. supplies can slow this process and potentially blunt an expected Russia counteroffensive over the summer, but Ukraine will need much more if it is to defeat Russia and reclaim occupied territories. It will need much more. We're not going to read any more of that because that's all you need to know. They need much more. And there are many in Congress. Of course, this is still a very politicized issue. There are many in Congress, especially on the Republican side, which has to save face. They're saying, oh, well, we don't know if there's going to be any more from here. And it's not certain. This took 6 months to pass. Who knows when the next package is going to be pushed through? So if this package isn't going to do it, and it's going to take perhaps months and months and months for the next one, it's quite clear that all of these doubts should tell us that Ukraine is actually in huge trouble on the battlefield, that it is not in a situation where simply throwing money at it, simply throwing weapons at Ukraine will change circumstances. Russia is really in the driver's seat now. And this isn't just me talking. I'm not just making this up. This actually is what CNN is saying. Here's what CNN had to say. Russia is making daily tactical gains. So what did Jake Sullivan say? He said that we can expect Russia to make tactical gains over the course of this aid package as it is being deliberated, used up, as the production starts getting into motion. Remember, a lot of this is going to military contractors Who knows how many weapons are actually going to be produced by them, whether it'll be effective, but they're going to be getting many of these contracts. In any event, Russia is making daily tactical gains in eastern Ukraine as concerns swirl around Ukrainian military reporting. So here we go. CNN says that Vladimir Putin's forces have made greater gains in at least three locations along the eastern front in Ukraine, including for the first time in several months an advance in the northern Kharkov region, highlighting again Kiev's need for ammunition and weapons from the United States and its allies. Russia's tactical advances are now daily and reflect a new tempo on the battlefield since the fall of Avdiivka in February. The gains are generally modest, from a few hundred meters of territory to perhaps a kilometer at most, but they are usually taking place in several locations at once. So what does that tell you? All along that front line. Meanwhile, Ukraine's losses are being accompanied by criticism from influential military bloggers and analysts of the armed forces' official battlefield updates. One of Russia's main efforts is in the Donetsk region, unsurprisingly. Ukraine's deep state monitoring group, which updates daily changes in frontline positions, shows Russia forces pushing forward in 8 different locations along 20 to 25 kilometers of front line in one-day period. Military bloggers on both sides have reported that Russian forces have crossed a water course and taken control of settlements in Semenvika and Berdichi, which Ukrainian Army Chief Alexander Syrsky confirmed in a post on Telegram Sunday. Russia had deployed up to 4 brigades in offensive operations in that area, said Syrsky. The withdrawal in the Donetsk operational zone continues, says Ukrainian blogger Miroshnikov. So there you have it. I mean, this is the situation on the battlefield. It's not good for Ukraine. It is one of retreat, of withdrawal, and while it is gradual, Russia is certainly not throwing everything it has at the front line. Nonetheless, the reality is that Ukraine is being pushed back, and it's only April, right? Because I'm going to get into Russia's plans in a second, or at least what is being reported. I don't have verification, but this is what is being reported. Slightly further south, Russian forces are making headway in the industrial town of Krasnoyarivka, entering from the south and the east. Fierce fighting had been reported around the town's large brick factory. One Russian military blogger wrote of the battle's importance. The liberation of the refractory plant would actually mean the fall of Krasnoyarivka fortification, as the northern outskirts of the settlement are private buildings, which will be too difficult to defend if the plant is lost. Elsewhere, about 180 kilometers or 112 miles to the north, Russia has also achieved their first successes in almost 3 months along that part of the front line that cuts into the Kharkov region. A Ukrainian army spokesman described Russian forces there as having become significantly more active over the past day, while Deep State assessed a Russian advance of between 1 and 2 kilometers into the village of Kilsivka. Overall, the front lines in this region have been among the most stable since Ukraine recaptured a large swath of territory in the Kharkov region in 2022. So there you have it. CNN reporting that all across the front line, there is pushback. Russia is making the gains. So what do we have here? We have the fact that this aid is not going to be a game changer, because there isn't really a Biden administration official. There isn't anyone in Ukraine's military side. There really isn't anyone saying that this aid can essentially turn the tide on the battlefield. And what does this mean? So there's reports, and I can't say whether these reports are verified or not, but I've been seeing them on Telegram. I've been seeing them on social media, that Russia at this point is looking at a full sort of victory in Donbass. That Donbass will collapse. The Ukrainian side will collapse by October if all things remain the same. Now, the aid situation could very well delay that prospect, but it's quite clear from what CNN is reporting, what this aid package has in it, as well as how the United States is reacting to it, that everyone involved to some degree, whether they try to deny it or delay their perhaps admissions or whatever it is, believe that, in fact, the trajectory of this conflict is moving in this direction anyway, that that the date may not be so significant. And of course, in this conflict, there have been a lot of predictions made over the course of it, which aren't always so accurate. But nonetheless, it's hard to do. We cannot know exactly what Russia is thinking. Only Russia knows what Russia is thinking, and Russia is very good at ensuring that they do not telegraph anything that they do. So all of this is to say, though, is that the battlefield situation, the situation on the ground for Ukraine, is leading to the scenario of full-blown collapse, possibly by this October. And what is October as well? It's the BRICS summit. So what a massive victory for BRICS it would be if this conflict were to, I'm not saying it's going to end in October, but if the primary sort of modus operandi, the location, the flashpoint for this NATO war on Russia were to collapse then. I mean, I think it would be quite fitting. So we're going to have to wait and see, because we don't know exactly how this will be used. We hear Patriot missiles are now being sent to Ukraine. We know that a lot of these infantry vehicles are already sent to Ukraine. All of these things will burn. Russia is going to destroy them. But of course, this takes more time. This takes energy. This takes resources. And so it's unclear what Ukraine will be able to mount. But we do have indications, given Russia's activity on the front line, that they are mounting, if not a red arrow offensive, a stronger push on that front line that could very well lead to major changes on the battlefield in the months to come, leading to some reports that October may be the date, October 2024, when Donbass is potentially fully liberated, or at least liberated to the point where Project Ukraine, NATO's objective in Ukraine, has completely collapsed and burst asunder. So we're going to see, but that's the direction that this is going in. The Ukraine aid package, well, taking up headlines, taking up space. We hear about it all the time. We hear about, we need these weapons, we need this ammunition. This ammunition's got to get to Ukraine. Then things will get better. Well, too little, too late. Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.